It's weird going back into the law school and seeing the faces of my classmates and remembering that they've booed me out of the law school. But I think that one thing positive has come from the whole situation. I think our classmates are maybe beginning to realize that shouting down speakers doesn't mean that their voices won't be heard. It just means that there's no opportunity to have dialogue or engage.
Welcome to Homeschool Talks, a podcast by HSLDA. This is a show about all things homeschooling, from practical tips to inspiring stories and everything in between. You can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes as well as upcoming guests and topics, sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. We're so glad you've joined us today, and we hope you enjoyed the program. Here's your host, Jim Mason.
Hi, I'm Jim Mason, President of Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and this is another episode of Homeschool Talks, where we talk to interesting people about things that matter in the homeschooling world. My guest today is Claire Hungar. She's a law student at Yale University, and she was homeschooled growing up, and we want to talk to her about some exciting things that happened to her recently in her career at Yale University, and how homeschooling helped her to face some real challenges. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So, Claire, tell us about yourself. You were homeschooled growing up.
That's right. So I was homeschooled from kindergarten all the way through high school. I have 3 siblings. I have an older brother and a younger brother, and then a twin sister. And all 4 of us were homeschooled 3.5 years apart from oldest to youngest. We basically took the same classes together, helped each other, studied together. It was really wonderful.
And tell us about your parents.
My parents are both lawyers. So I'm from Northern Virginia. My dad practices law in D.C. My mom retired to homeschool us. But they both raised us thinking about logic and discussing and debating things. And I think that's where I got my love for the law and for what I'm doing now.
So were you involved in debate growing up?
I was. We did NCFCA for, I think, 5 or 6 years. Every year of eligibility we did it. And I think that was like the big homeschooling experience that we did. We traveled up and down the country for tournaments, competed in many, many, many different events, both debate and speech. And most of my friends, a large group of my friends from high school and before, are from NCFCA.
Where did you go to college?
I went to the University of Virginia, Wahoo in Charlottesville. It was wonderful. I loved the area. I loved my classes. And yeah, I had a wonderful time.
So how did being a homeschooled student at UVA, how was that?
I think I was the only one in my class, if I remember correctly. There was someone that I knew actually from homeschooling who came the year after me. But I really think that homeschooling helped me a lot with my academics. Homeschooling is a lot like higher education. You're directing your own study. You have a lot of free time. You really have to be intellectually curious to do well in college. And I think that's what my mom instilled in me when we were studying as homeschool students. And I saw some of my peers actually struggle with that and have a problem knowing when to study and how much to study and what classes to take and things like that. But for me, it felt normal.
Now, how did you make how did you make it to Yale University School of Law?
Well, Yale had kind of been a dream of mine. My parents were both graduates of Yale Law School. And so in the back of my mind, I mean, it wasn't something, you can't plan on it, but it was something that I always had hoped maybe would be possible. And so I was intentional about taking the right classes and working hard and studying. And my parents encouraged me to apply to Yale. And I was really blessed to be admitted and to get to go.
So is it true at Yale they don't give out grades?
It is true. Yes, we have 2 grades. We have H's, honors, which is the top 30% of each class, and then P's, pass. So everyone passes. There aren't real letter grades.
So that's a little bit like homeschooling, right?
Absolutely. Yes, used to that too. What is a GPA even? I don't really know.
So at Yale, you became a member of the Federalist Society. What is the Federalist Society?
So the Federalist Society is a small c conservative organization, and it's has principles that are focused on how to interpret the law and what it means to be a faithful practitioner of the law. And so we're a group of students who are interested in conservative legal ideas, are interested in the Constitution and defending the true values, the original values of the Constitution, and then interested in educating our classmates about what the law is and learning things that we wouldn't otherwise get to talk about in classes.
So it's a national organization. I've attended the National Lawyers Conference in D.C. a few times, and they have chapters at every law school. And part of the purpose of the chapters at law schools is to bring in speakers. Did you have any experience with that?
That was my job last year. Our first semester, we brought 22 speakers just in that semester alone, which I think was the most ever for any FedSoc chapter. I loved doing that. It was great because I got to learn about legal topics that I wouldn't otherwise know about, meet really impressive, intelligent people, and have the opportunity to share some of these ideas with my classmates too.
So out of the 22 speakers that you brought in last year, do any of them stick out in your memory?
Absolutely. So for second semester, one person that we decided to invite was Kristen Wagner. She was at the time general counsel for the Alliance Defending Freedom, is now also the CEO. ADF is a Christian legal organization that focuses on religious liberty and civil rights and has had many victories across the United States and globally. And so we wanted to bring Kristen to come talk about their most recent victory at the Supreme Court on a relatively uninteresting or dry legal subject, but a very important one for civil rights litigation.
So what was that very interesting but dry subject for civil rights?
So it's about standing and whether a certain type of damages, if you're seeking damages that are insignificant, they're not significant financial or compensatory damages, whether you have standing to continue to bring a suit. Standing is basically the legal concept that allows a litigant to actually bring a case and then receive a judgment in a court of law.
Yeah, so standing is kind of the bane of lawyers like me who bring civil rights lawsuits because the Supreme Court has said that you have to have actual harm before you can sue somebody and get the court's attention. So Article 3 federal courts, you have to have an actual controversy. And actual controversy means you have to have actual harms and you have to be able to get something of use out of the court. And in this case, they wanted $1, I think. Was it $1?
I believe that's right.
$1. So nominal damages. Where oftentimes in civil rights cases, there aren't any real monetary damages, but there are real harms. So Kristen Wagner argued this case in the Supreme Court and won $1 out of it. Did you think they got attorney's fees out of that or what?
I don't think so.
No. And so you invited her to talk about this relatively inside baseball legal question to Yale University School of Law, Federalist Society. What happened?
Well, so leading up to the event, we did have ideas that there might be some controversy. ADF, as a Christian organization, subscribes to traditional values for marriage and family, not the most popular with my classmates. And I'd advertised the event through the class-wide email that sends it out to everyone at the law school, including professors and faculty members. And we had a couple of email responses from students condemning the event, condemning FedSoc for inviting her, complaining about ADF's values. But for the most part, there wasn't that much pushback, at least leading up to the event.
Well then, the day of the event, what happened?
So I show up to the room a little early just to make sure that everything's prepared. And to my surprise, some of my classmates had also showed up early, and they were putting out pamphlets at every seat in the classroom, basically explaining what ADF was in their own biased terms and telling students who might be interested in attending the event that even by listening to what Kristen had to say, even by sitting in the room, they were supporting bigotry, they were enemies of LGBTQ people, that basically students should leave the event and not listen to the event. Which was kind of ironic because by the time the event started, 150 of my classmates were actually at the event, but they weren't there to listen. They were dressed provocatively. They had offensive signs accusing us of being fascists and bigots. They had pride flags, and they were ready to disrupt the event, not to listen.
So what did you do? I mean, you were kind of Kristen's host in this moment. How did it affect you? What did you do?
Well, I started the event. I think I knew that it wasn't going to be a normal event, but I think the goal at that point was just to demonstrate composure and calm and not respond in the same way that they were going to respond. So I introduced the speakers, and that's when everyone in the room who were there to protest stood up all together and started just yelling things and basically trying to start a fight with Kristen. It was really impressive for me to see the way that she responded, because even though they were angry and aggressive, she was very calm and very winsome and really modeled, I think, what good communication is, even in the face of conflict.
You said speakers. Who was the other speaker?
So because this is such an important legal issue for civil rights litigation, we actually had a lot of people who supported ADF at the Supreme Court. And so we invited a speaker from the American Humanist Association, which is a very secular organization that tends not to be aligned, in fact, is often on the other side of ADF issues. But so another woman named Monica Miller, and she came because to her, this was an important subject, and it's important to have dialogue and to find places of agreement, even with people that you disagree with. And so those were the two speakers that we had on this panel for this case.
And they were kind of generally on different poles of the ideological spectrum, but on this one issue, they were in agreement.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember walking in with Monica, and she was talking to some of the people who had lined the hallways before the event. And she was saying, I agree with you. I'm on your side, but you should come listen to this event because this matters. And this actually helps civil rights litigation for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And that's the hallmark of the Federalist Society, really, is getting people who may not even agree on anything together in dialogue. And at the National Lawyers Conference, it's frequently the way they're set up. Most of their panels, they'll have two people on either side of the argument, usually moderated by a federal judge. And they have this back and forth, really civil dialogue about things that they intensely disagree about. And that's. I mean, I think you probably had events like that at the Federalist Society, and that's what it was designed for. So, were you surprised by the reaction?
I sadly wasn't surprised by the reaction. The climate at Yale, and I think this is true at other law schools as well, more and more has begun to reject even the idea that having dialogue with people you disagree with is a good thing. A lot of my classmates would say that by even engaging with certain ideas, you're allowing harm to occur. The words themselves are violence. And so in their minds, even letting Kristen come, even having ADF and giving ADF a platform, not even to talk about the things that they dislike, to talk about something neutral, even that was too much.
Well, so how did the day resolve?
So about 15, 20 minutes into the event, the protesters, who were still standing up, decided to file out of the room as disruptively as possible. So they walked right in front of the speakers. They would bang on tables. They carried signs and tried to block our view of Kristen and Monica. And then the moment that they stepped outside the classroom, they started yelling as loudly as possible, banging on the walls, stamping, clapping, just being as loud as possible so we would have difficulty hearing the conversation inside the room. And this continued throughout the rest of the event. And so by the end of the event, we had become concerned that it would be difficult for the people who had stayed inside and listened to actually leave safely. So we had to bring in the Yale police, who I gathered Kristen and Monica together, and then the three of us, we were escorted out through the protesters blocking the exits. The police had to clear a path for us to walk through. And as we walked through the halls of the law school and out the front door, the protesters booed, yelled shame, and were basically just screaming at us the entire time. And then we were escorted into a police car where they took us to the lunch that we were having, so we weren't followed by the protesters.
And I mean, of course, you're used to riding in police cars, right?
Absolutely. A normal experience for me. No, it was the first time in a police car and hopefully the last time.
And how were things when you reassembled for the lunch?
The lunch was just a smaller group of students and then the speakers. And so it was it was, I think, helpful to debrief after that and talk a little bit. And I think the one thing that was really interesting was Monica, the attorney with the American Humanist Association. She was so disappointed and really saddened by people that she would normally consider herself aligned with and the way that they responded. And so I think it actually gave her a better understanding of the state of our law schools right now and the state of the discourse.
Yeah. So how do you feel going forward? You're now a third-year student there, still involved with Federalist Society. What's your relationship with your classmates, and what's your outlook for the future?
It's weird going back into the law school and seeing the faces of my classmates and remembering that they've booed me out of the law school. But I think that one thing positive has come from the whole situation. I think our classmates are maybe beginning to realize that shouting down speakers doesn't mean that their voices won't be heard. It just means that there's no opportunity to have dialogue or engage. And I've been able to have some really productive conversations with some of my classmates about both that event, about events that we've hosted later. And this year, we've actually had pretty unprecedented attendance at some of our events. So we're pretty optimistic that this might actually lead to some positive changes and enable us to share more of our ideas and have better conversations with our peers.
Well, that's really exciting to think that it could have that kind of effect going forward. What are your plans when you finish law school?
I will be going to Kentucky for a year after graduation. I'll be clerking for a judge. Clerkship's basically an internship, so I'll spend a year working with him, doing legal research and drafting, helping to draft opinions and work through what the law is in the individual cases that he'll consider.
And what do you hope to do with your law degree after you're finished with all your internships?
I don't know. I'm waiting to see what the Lord has in mind for me.
Well, I bet there's going to be something exciting in store for you. Well, what do you have to say to the homeschool moms and dads out there who are raising, their children in this culture and heading towards colleges all over the country?
Well, first of all, thank you, because I think what homeschool moms and dads do is underappreciated oftentimes by the kids, but so important. And I'm so grateful to my parents for the way that they gave me the values that helped me. And then I think the other thing is it can be scary. The world is a scary place. But I mean, scripture says to train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And I think that what's important is to instill those values in your children, but then send them out to college, send them out to the world, and let them be salt and light to those around them.
Well, Claire, thank you so much. So I don't know if I said this earlier, but Claire came to our National Leaders Conference and was interviewed by our attorney, Amy Buckmeyer, who was also a president of her Federalist Society at the University of Wisconsin. It was a great interview. Claire, we really appreciate your coming. Really appreciate the way that you stood firm in your values and the difference you're making, really, that, in this event actually made national news. It was a big deal. There were federal judges who were appalled by this on both sides of the ideological judicial world, saying, these people shouldn't even be allowed to have the judicial clerkships that you're going to because of this uncivil behavior. And, I think it's really important that you endured through that and that you went back to the law school and you're still engaging with those people and making a difference for the world, really, so that we can get back to a time when we can have civil discourse about things we intensely disagree about. So well done. Thank you so much. And for those out there, I'm Jim Mason, president of Homeschool Legal Defense Association. You can find out more about the work that we do by visiting our website at hslda.org. Again, my guest has been Claire Hungar, who is finishing up her law school career this year and heading off to do great things. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you so much.
Today's episode is made possible by HSLDA's Generation Joshua program. Do you have a student who wants to make a difference in our nation? Generation Joshua empowers teens to make the most of their citizenship through local clubs, immersive simulations, online courses, and real-life campaign experiences. For more information, visit generationjoshua.org. That's generationjoshua.org. Thanks for listening to this episode of Homeschool Talks. If you've enjoyed this conversation, will you do us a favor by sharing it with a friend or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts? As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hsldA.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes, as well as upcoming guests and topics, you can sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. That's all for now. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we'll see you next time.